before starting Plum, I was an Ironman triathlete, hung up those shoes to run a different kind of race, which is a company. And then after this 6 years, I was 50 pounds heavier than I was when I was racing. And my wife, she's learned the art of subtlety. She's like, you need to get your shit figured out. And, because when you face, death in the face, you're like, okay, you become very tough. And so she focused that on me, and she's like, all right, now I've figured my shit out, and you got to figure yours out. And so I was like, yes, ma'am. I was like, yes, I'm on it. And but probably like a guy, I wasn't super keen on going to doctors. But as an entrepreneur, I'm like, this is an interesting problem to solve. Like, I can't be alone, in that idea that work has gotten the best of me, and that our lives, especially when they get complicated with kids and careers and all that stuff, that this is probably something that many of us feel. And so I was like, oh, that's an interesting problem to solve. And so I pursued it more in that framework. So I reached out to the best scientists in the world. And I met Dr. Leroy Hood, was the father of the Human Genome Project, got my genome sequence from him, learned a ton of stuff. The guy's brilliant. Met some scientists in the Netherlands that have been working on personalized nutrition for the last 10 years, and just got every test done you can imagine. I got on a bike and had this ventilator in my mouth for 45 minutes trying to figure out where my optimal fat burn zone is. And I was like I guess they'd call it biohacking now, but it was just sort of more tinkering to kind of figure out what's going on. And then I had all of this stuff in front of me, and I sat down with a functional medicine doctor and said, well, what do I do? And they're like, well, you can fix this with pharma, or you can fix it with food. And I'm like, well, let's try and fix it with food. And so we crafted a personalized nutrition plan for myself based on all this bio data. And it was so funny because she's like, well, how long do you think you should do it? And she's totally leading a horse to water. I'm like, I don't know, maybe a month. And she's like, let's try 3, and I'm like, all right, so I walked out of there very proud of myself that I'd created this program myself. I'd signed up for 3 months, and she was kind of like, doing the puppet strings. And after about 3 months, I started feeling amazing. I kept going. And
what did you learn about yourself?
Oh, yeah. So, the results were actually terrifying. The first is I found out that I was a middle-aged white guy. So somehow, I was like, what? It hit me like a freight train. I'm like, God. I'm like, I don't know, when did that happen? I'm like, I'll tat it up. I'm like, I got to get more, I don't know, I got to get more tattoos or something. But seriously, within that, I actually found that I was pre-diabetic, high risk for a heart attack. The 4 cups of coffee that I was drinking every day were accelerating that risk by 100-fold. And then a whole bunch of really interesting stuff, in there with genetics and blood work and stuff like that. And so, what I ended up doing was basically the way, the plan that I eat on is a high protein, moderate fat, low carb way of eating. And over 6 months of doing that, I lost 25 pounds, had more energy than I had in years. And my 2 daughters who, I'm the kind of guy who's rolling into bed at 9 o'clock at night. I'm up at, 10 hanging out, energy, and they're like, who is this guy, And it was amazing, right? And so that was the aha moment for me, that this needs to be available to everyone who has the interest or the will to tap into the best version of themselves.